Welcome to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button so you don't miss any more shocking and captivating stories. Enjoy watching. The first thing Calder Knox noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind that settles into a home after a long day, but the hollow kind. The absence of something that should have been there. Laughter maybe. Or the familiar sound of Mara moving through the house, humming without realizing it. That night, the house felt staged, like a model home no one actually lived in. Calder stood in the kitchen, still wearing his coat, keys dangling from his fingers. The clock above the stove read 8:17 p.m. She was late. Mara had told him about the party that morning while pouring coffee into a travel mug. She'd been dressed too carefully for a Saturday, dark jeans, a soft cream blouse she usually reserved for dinners out, hair pulled back in that deliberate but effortless way. He remembered thinking it was odd at the time, but he hadn't said anything. "Just a thing with people from work," she'd said casually. "Invite only. Kind of last minute." Calder had smiled, kissed her cheek, and said, "Have fun." Now, standing alone in their kitchen, that sentence echoed back at him with an aftertaste he didn't like. He set his keys down and opened the fridge. A bottle of white wine sat untouched on the top shelf, the one she'd bought just in case. They wanted a glass together later. Calder closed the fridge without taking it out. It wasn't jealousy that tightened his chest. Not yet. It was confusion. They'd been married 9 years. Not perfect years, but real ones. Shared routines, quiet compromises, inside jokes that survived long after their punchlines wore thin. If Mara wanted to go to a party without him, that was fine. Normal, even. What wasn't normal was the way she'd avoided his eyes that morning, or how she hadn't mentioned where it was, or who else was going. Calder shook his head, annoyed with himself. "You're reading into nothing," he thought. Still, he pulled out his phone. Mara had posted a story on Instagram an hour earlier. He hadn't seen it until now. The video was short and shaky, taken in low light. Music thumped in the background, something electronic and bass-heavy. Calder leaned closer to the screen. There she was. Not just there, alive in a way he hadn't seen in months. Her hair was down now, falling loosely over her shoulders. She was laughing, head tilted back, one hand raised as if mid-dance. A man stood close beside her, his face partially out of frame, but his arm was unmistakably around her waist. The caption read, "Spontaneous nights are the best nights." Calder felt something cold slide through him. He replayed the video once, twice. The arm, the closeness, the way she leaned into that touch as if it belonged there. He locked his phone and set it face down on the counter. For a long moment he just stood there, breathing slowly, trying to keep his thoughts orderly. Calder had always been like that, methodical, almost to a fault. As a data systems architect, he trusted patterns, not impulses, evidence, not feelings. And yet, he poured himself a glass of water and drank it too quickly. His mind began doing what it always did when something didn't add up, cataloging details. Mara had been distant lately, not cold exactly, but distracted. Her phone never left her side anymore. She'd started taking calls outside, saying it was work stuff. She joined a new gym across town, despite the perfectly good one 5 minutes away. He told himself it was a phase. Everyone had them. But Calder couldn't unsee the way she'd looked in that video. Single. At 10:42 p.m., Mara texted, "Running late, don't wait up." The heart emoji felt misplaced, like a punctuation mark stolen from another sentence. Calder replied after a few minutes, "Okay, drive safe." He lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of cars passing on the street. When Mara finally came home after midnight, she slipped into the bedroom quietly. He pretended to be asleep. She smelled different. Not perfume, something sharper, like cologne that wasn't his. She showered, then slid into bed, careful not to wake him. her back pressed lightly against his. Calder kept his breathing slow and even. He didn't confront her. Not then. The next morning, Mara acted normal. Too normal. She made eggs, asked about his plans for the day, complained about a coworker named Janelle. She didn't mention the party unless Calder prompted her, and when he did, her answers were vague. "It was fine," she said. "Nothing special." Calder nodded, watching her closely. That was when he decided, not emotionally, not angrily, but with a quiet, internal click, that he needed to know the truth. Not guesses, not assumptions, facts. Over the next few days, he paid attention. Not in an obvious way. Calder had always been observant. Now he sharpened that instinct. He noticed how Mara angled her phone away when she texted, how she smiled at messages she didn't share, how she suddenly cared more about how she looked when running errands than she ever had before. One evening, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Calder didn't touch it. Not yet. He wasn't ready to cross that line. Not without something solid to stand on. He told himself that if he was wrong, if this was all paranoia, he'd never forgive himself. But deep down, something else whispered, "You're not wrong." A week later, Mara mentioned another event. "Friday night," she said breezily. "Work thing again," Calder smiled. "Invite only?" She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Yeah," she said. "You know how it is," Calder nodded. This time, he didn't stay home. And that decision, the quiet choice to follow instead of wait, would change everything. Calder parked 2 blocks away, just as he had planned. The neighborhood wasn't unfamiliar. Mara's office parties often happened at upscale lofts in the Arts District. But tonight, the streets felt different. Empty, almost staged, as if the city itself were conspiring to hide whatever he was about to see. He stayed in the car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart thumping in a rhythm that wasn't entirely fear. No, it was anticipation. He told himself this was about clarity, about seeing things as they really were, not imagining them. Yet even as he took out his phone to check the event address, a part of him dreaded what he would find. The building was discreet, one of those converted warehouses with a black metal door and no signs outside. A small group of people stood near the entrance, chatting, laughing, holding glasses of wine and cocktails. Calder's stomach knotted as he scanned the crowd. And then he saw her, Mara. She was exactly as she had been in the Instagram video, only more animated, more engaged. Not just smiling, but alive in a way that made Calder feel like a ghost, walking into someone else's life. Her hair was down, her blouse slightly off the shoulder, and the laugh that escaped her lips was completely unguarded, free from the quiet caution she usually reserved for him. And there he was, Eric Donovan, a tall man, carefully groomed, dressed sharp but casually, his arm draped around Mara's waist as they leaned into each other, talking, laughing. Calder's throat went dry. He stayed behind a pillar, letting his eyes take in the scene without being seen. Mara tilted her head toward Eric, brushing her hand against his chest. Calder felt something twist inside him, something cold and heavy. He wanted to move, to yell, to run, but instead he froze. Minutes passed. Mara's laughter rang out like a bell in a silent house. Every word she spoke, every movement, chipped away at the version of their life Calder had believed in. And yet, even in that moment of betrayal, he analyzed everything. The way Eric held her, the small, intimate gestures, the way she leaned in like he was the only person in the room. Calder stayed until the crowd thinned. He didn't confront them. He didn't need to. What he saw was more than enough. And as he drove home, he rehearsed conversations he might never have, questioning his own restraint. At home, Mara was waiting, calm, composed, as though nothing had happened. Calder poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat on the couch, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. "Hey," she said, brushing past him, wrapping herself in a towel. "Did you sleep okay?" Calder didn't answer. "I didn't mean to wake you," she continued, oblivious or pretending to be. He could feel the tension building, coiling in his chest. Part of him wanted to scream. Part wanted to leave forever without a word. Instead, he spoke quietly. "Did you have fun at your party?" Mara tilted her head, curious. "Yeah, it was fine. Work people, you know how it is." Calder stared at her. He saw every detail, the way her eyes flickered for a moment, the slight hesitation before she replied. "Did Eric go with you?" His voice was even, almost cold. Mara frowned. "Eric? Oh no. Why would he?" Her lie was lazy, sloppy, transparent. Calder could feel it like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in their bedroom, flipping through her social media, piecing together the subtle signs he had ignored before. The disappearing weekends, the vague mentions of late work nights, the way she always checked her phone when he walked into the room. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was calculating. He started keeping notes, names, dates, times. Every interaction that felt off. Every lie she told, even the small ones. Calder knew from experience that patterns didn't lie. People did. By the end of the week, he had enough to confront her. But he didn't. He needed certainty. Evidence he couldn't argue with. He began a quiet surveillance, watching who she texted, noticing how she moved through her phone, keeping track of her schedule. He didn't call her out. Not yet. Instead, he collected, observed, waited. The emotional roller coaster of suspicion, dread, and obsession weighed heavily on him. In the office, he felt disconnected. At home, he felt like a ghost living alongside someone else. He began snapping at small things. A crooked picture frame, an untied shoelace. Not because he wanted to, but because tension had built too high to contain. And then, one evening, he saw it. A text notification he couldn't ignore. A message from Eric, sent accidentally to Mara's phone while it was in her hand. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Just us, alone." Calder's hands shook. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But in that instant, the fog cleared. There was no need for speculation anymore. He knew. And yet, he still didn't confront her. Because he had a plan. He would give her one last chance to slip up. One last piece of evidence that couldn't be denied. Then, he would act. Calder Knox, methodical, careful, precise, had become something else entirely. A man who had loved too much, but who refused to be blind. The countdown had begun. Calder Knox had never considered himself the type of man to lie, but in the last 2 weeks, he had become a master of deception, not to protect himself, but to expose Mara. Every word he spoke, every movement he made, was carefully calculated. He smiled at her, hugged her, joked about trivial things, all while his mind was running a silent inventory of every interaction, every hidden message, every suspicious absence. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening. Mara had left for her late work meeting, a phrase that now carried the weight of years of denial. Calder had followed her in the car, not too close, just enough to keep track, and watched as she parked at a small, nondescript apartment building across town. She didn't knock. A key opened the door, and she disappeared inside. Calder didn't stop to watch long. He had learned enough. Over the past week, he had hacked together a timeline, cross-referenced Instagram check-ins, phone activity, and what little social media presence Eric had. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. They were not just meeting. They were deliberately hiding it. That night, he set up his laptop, pulling up a private cloud backup of her phone. He had never wanted to go this far, but he needed proof. Something concrete, undeniable. There it was. Messages between Mara and Eric, filled with flirtation, planning, and more intimate language than Calder wanted to read. "Can't wait to be with you tonight," stood out like a neon sign against the cold, black text background. Calder stared at it, hands gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the anger, the betrayal, the ache of being replaced in the very life he thought was shared. Then, he pushed it down. He needed control, precision, order, not chaos. The next day, Mara came home as if nothing had changed. Calder had prepared himself mentally. He would not explode. He would confront her with facts, not emotion. Facts she could not deny. "Hey," she said, stepping inside. Her voice was casual, unaware, even playful. Calder looked up from his laptop, where he had the messages displayed, blurred just enough to keep his composure. "Mara, we need to talk," he said. His voice was calm, but each word landed like a stone. She frowned, tilting her head. "About what?" Calder stood, closing the laptop slowly. "About the party last weekend. About Eric. About your activities while I was at home." Her eyes widened slightly, but she masked it with a polite curiosity. "Activities?" He gestured toward the laptop. "The texts, the planning, the late nights, the way you've been avoiding me. I've seen it all, Mara. Every detail." For the first time, a flicker of panic crossed her face. Not the dramatic, exaggerated panic of a guilty person in a movie, but a real, human panic. Her lips parted, but no words came. Calder continued, steady, methodical. "I've documented it. All of it. There's no way to deny it. You've been meeting Eric. You've been lying to me, to us." Mara's composure broke, if only slightly. She looked away, biting her lip. "Calder, don't," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Don't lie. Not to me. Not now. I've waited, I've observed, and I have the evidence." The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Calder could see the realization settling over her face. Anger, fear, shame, and something he recognized too well. Regret. "You loved me, didn't you?" he asked quietly. "You loved me, or at least, you did." Mara's eyes glistened, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. Calder's chest tightened. Not from rage this time, but from the collapse of something he had built, something he had believed in. His life, their life, had been fractured, and he was the only one who saw the cracks. He took a deep breath. "I'm done pretending this can be fixed. I can't unsee what I've seen, and I can't trust someone who sees betrayal as casual, as normal." She tried to speak again, a desperate apology forming on her lips. Calder shook his head. "No, I'm done listening. You chose this life. I chose truth." For a moment, the air was heavy with unsaid words. Calder's mind raced, planning the next steps with the same precision he applied to every project he undertook. Divorce, separation, protecting himself financially and emotionally. These were not abstract concepts now. They were immediate, real, and necessary. He left her standing in the living room, stunned, and went to pack a bag. Not in anger, but in resolve. He would stay with a friend for a while, organize the divorce quietly, efficiently. Mara's shocked silence followed him like a shadow. As he walked out the door, he paused. "One last thing," he said without turning around. "This isn't just betrayal. It's karma waiting for you to notice. I hope you see it someday." The door clicked shut behind him. Over the following weeks, Calder methodically dismantled the life they had shared. Accounts were separated, friends were informed, lawyers consulted. Yet, amid the legalities and the heartbreak, he allowed himself a small, private satisfaction. He shared the truth with a few close friends, carefully, without malice, letting them witness the clarity he had found in the chaos. And Mara, she realized, far too late, that the one person she had taken for granted, the one who had been observant, patient and loving, was not someone to deceive lightly. Calder's revenge was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, efficient, and complete. She had lost the trust, the foundation, and the future she had assumed would remain hers. In that quiet, Calder felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not joy, not relief, but the serenity that comes from knowing he had faced betrayal with eyes wide open and had walked away unbroken. The divorce papers were signed on a crisp Tuesday morning. Calder Knox sat in the lawyer's office, the sterile hum of the air conditioner blending with the scratch of the pen as Mara's attorney slid the final document across the table. Calder didn't need to look at her. He had memorized every expression, every slight twitch that hinted at guilt over the last few months. Mara met his eyes for the first time that day. Her face was composed, but the mask had cracks. Her pride, her arrogance, all the confidence she once carried effortlessly, was gone. She tried to speak, perhaps to offer a final apology, a plea, or even a justification, but Calder didn't flinch. "No words," he said calmly. "Not necessary." The lawyer handed him the final copy. Calder took it, signed it, and placed it in his folder. It felt heavier than paper had any right to be. Not heavy with anger or pain, but with closure. Afterward, Calder drove to the small coffee shop he used to frequent when he needed to think. The city was alive around him, cars honking, pedestrians moving, street vendors calling out. But he felt detached, untethered in a way that was unfamiliar, yet liberating. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching the rain begin to fall. It was in this quiet, mundane moment that he allowed himself to reflect. Mara's betrayal had been devastating, yes, but the true damage would have been living a life that wasn't real, pretending to trust someone who didn't deserve it. Calder had avoided that. He had confronted reality, however painful, and acted with precision. And then, as he stirred his coffee, a small thought crept into his mind, a little act of poetic justice. Calder had not sought revenge. He had not needed it. But he realized there was one final way to ensure Mara would feel the weight of her choices, if only indirectly. He picked up his phone and checked her social media. Mara's posts were as polished as ever, but Calder noticed something she hadn't: the public comments praising her relationship with Eric. Fans, friends, colleagues, all projecting admiration onto a lie she had lived in secret. A small smile crossed Calder's face. He didn't post anything, didn't expose her. No, that wasn't necessary. Instead, he quietly sent a message to Eric, professional and neutral. "You've been made aware of the full context. Proceed carefully." Calder didn't need to explain more. A man like Eric would understand. The subtle warning would unsettle him. That was enough. Mara's carefully constructed world would now carry the tension she hadn't noticed, the uncertainty she had ignored in her pursuit of something thrilling. Calder didn't touch it, didn't gloat. The truth would linger silently, a shadow over her new life. Weeks later, Calder moved into a modest apartment downtown, smaller than the house he had shared with Mara, but filled with light and space for his own life. He decorated slowly, intentionally, making the space his own. There were no reminders of betrayal, no traces of Mara, no shadows of the past. He began to rebuild. Friends, long ignored in the haze of marriage, returned to his life. Work, once a means of survival, became a source of renewed purpose. And most importantly, Calder discovered something he hadn't realized in years: the freedom to trust himself again. Occasionally, when he walked past the coffee shop, he imagined Mara sitting inside, scrolling through her phone, unaware that the subtle warning he had sent had unsettled her life more than she would ever know. He didn't feel satisfaction, not really, just closure and a quiet acknowledgement that he had survived betrayal intact. Calder Knox had lost a wife, yes, But he had gained something far more valuable: his clarity, his dignity, and the unshakable knowledge that no one could manipulate the world he had built for himself. And in the end, that was the ultimate revenge. Not confrontation, not drama, not anger, but the simple, quiet act of walking away stronger, untouched by her deception. The rain tapped against the window as Calder took a deep breath, letting it wash over him, carrying away the last echoes of a life that had never truly been his. He smiled faintly, finishing his coffee, and stepped out into the world. Alone, yes, but unbroken. The end.